Okay, perfect. So first of all, welcome everybody to this first actually panel discussion of two. The other one is in the late afternoon about the future of academic Agile research. And we have invited three experts this morning about this topic. I want to hear about your view about the Agile research. And yeah, in the very first panel, I'm happy to welcome Deepti Jain from India, Aino Corry from Aarhus, Denmark, right? And Robert Biddle from Carleton University, currently located in Auckland, New Zealand. We have sent you some questions before to prepare for the meeting and to give a statement about your view. But before we start, actually, I would like to introduce yourself in 1 or 2 minutes, what you're currently doing, especially what your relation and background is concerning academic research and or Agile professional experience. Okay, Deepti, we want to start?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited and looking forward to learn, from you, amazing, intelligent, experienced researchers. I, on the other hand, come from the industry. I'm an Agile consultant. I also run a boutique consulting firm, Agile Virgin. But when I started learning, I was full-time employee with an organization working there for 10 years, starting from development to project management and all. And that's when Agile happened to all of us, and we were pushed into transformation, and truckloads people were sent for training for Agile. uh, I felt there is only limited knowledge which I could get. And so for that, I started going and interacting with the community. And that's when I realized, oh, there is so much more to explore and learn. And so I also became a community builder. And by the time I completed 10 years, I quit my full time job and started consulting. So it's been now 7 years doing that. So it's a total of 17 experience, if I have to say. But in doing so, I also realized that industry does not have a lot of access to research. And so, looking at that and interacting a lot with Agile Alliance, going to XP conference, I wanted to work on research. And so I invited experts and researchers and started Change Agent Summit, which basically works on industry and academia collaboration, generating research. The first report that we generated was State of Agile Transformation in India, looking at the culture, mindset, and socio-economical position of country. So yeah, that's about me.
Okay, thank you very much. I know you want to continue?
Thank you, and I also want to say thank you for inviting me. So my background is that my PhD in computer science is from 2001, so that's 20 years ago now. And I've been going back and forth between academia and industry for 10 years, from 2001 to 2011, where when I was at university, I would research in software architecture and how to teach computer science, so the learning of computer science and how to present it. And then when I was in industry, I was first a developer, and then a manager, and then I was a teacher of like Java programming and design patterns and architecture patterns. And then little by little, I became interested in Agile, starting with retrospectives. And the past 10 years, I've been helping different companies in industry to implement Agile in a way that fits them well. And so my background is that I couldn't figure out whether I wanted to be in academia and industry. I like things from both sides, and I've been in the middle. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And Robert?
Hi, so I'm Robert Biddle. My current position is Professor of Computer Science and Cognitive Science at Carleton University in Ottawa. I kind of identify as half Canadian and half a New Zealander. I've lived about half my adult life in both of those countries. I started being interested in this topic many years ago. Deepti very kindly talked about experience. I think in my case, that's really just old age. When you've been around for a lot, you've seen many things, so you have many stories to tell. I did work in industry for a number of years, and I shuttled back and forth between the academic world and the industry world, but that was quite a long time ago now. I've principally been an academic for a long time now. I started being interested in what was later called Agile development when I went to a little informal group in 1997 led by Kent Beck, where he was talking about his ideas that became extreme programming. And especially from my work in industry, but also in teaching software engineering, it was extremely refreshing because, to be honest, everyone I knew thought that a lot of the things that we did in software engineering were either wrong-headed or a waste of time. And extreme programming in Agile was such a refreshing view. It seemed to address all of the kind of wrong ideas that had frustrated us for a long, long time. So I started doing research when I worked in Wellington in New Zealand, working with some of my colleagues, particularly on the customer role in XP, what we would call the product owner in Scrum. And my principal interest in Agile software development has to do with collaboration, and I've done a number of projects, and I'll talk about some aspects of that in a little while. Actually, for most of the time that I've been working in Canada, my primary research has been on human factors in computer security. I wasn't working much on Agile development until Martin here came and visited me while on sabbatical. And he got me all fired up about it again with some of the excellent data that he and Andreas Meyer had been collecting in Switzerland. And being a total sucker for analyzing empirical data, I then talked for hours and days and weeks and months and years to Martin and Andreas and got me all excited again. So that's my story.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Welcome also to our external guests. Actually, they have increased. So, and I would like to encourage you and invite you, if you have questions, post them in the chat, or we start the discussion so that we can hopefully have an interactive panel discussion also with the external guests. And actually, I forgot to mention at the very beginning that I have a big thanks to the organizers actually of this event, the Agile Research Network in the UK, actually Swiss Agile Research Network and Victoria University of Wellington. Big thanks to Katie and Peggy for hosting this event here with the MS Teams. And also thank you to the sponsors of this event, the Agile Alliance, Scrum Alliance, Business Consortium, the Agile Business Consortium, Program Management Institute, and the Business Agility Institute. So big thanks to them for supporting this event. Okay, as preparation, actually we have sent some questions to you as the panelists to prepare your view on the Agile research, academic Agile research. We have sent you 3 questions, which I would like to show also to the audience. Here you should see now the 3 questions. What are the main research areas on Agile today, and what research areas are going to emerge in the near future? How do you see the relationship between research and the ecosystem of Agile? And how can organizations implementing Agile benefit from research on Agile? Okay, these were the questions that we sent you before as preparation to present your view on the future of academic Agile research. Okay, Deepti, what is your view on Agile research?
So my inferences will mostly come from India, and to the conferences around I have gone. So I'll say the maximum impact which I saw was definitely from XP conference, and then Agile Alliance's work on experience reports. Because otherwise my entire exposure was from industry, from the work that I was doing. And Also, it just happened that I met a researcher actually, and he forced me a lot. You should go to XP. You should go to XP. Get the exposure, see what they are doing, and that was definitely transforming. And so when I came back, I said, we are doing Change Agent Summit. We have to meet more of researchers. I went to a couple of colleges, and then I found that actually there is not a lot of work that is happening, especially if I have to say India, in terms of academic research on the Agile front. On the other hand, there is a lot of work that community is doing, but then that is mostly coming from industry. So what is lacking? The lack is about maturity in terms of understanding human system dynamics or design and how all of this impacts. Because what industry is doing is, okay, they learn some of the Agile implementation framework. They definitely are seeing the dynamics, in terms of day-to-day working, the hierarchies, different roles, of course, the way software is done, the complaints from the customers, and in general overall user response. So for me, I see that there is a lot that is needed to be done for industry and academia collaboration, because we are just two different worlds then working in silos. So how to bridge that gap becomes a question. If we bridge that gap, there is so much that our industry can gain, and we definitely need that. We need more of research work where industry is directly involved. uh, if we go back to the next question, uh, you know, yeah, there is a beautiful possible relationship. And as I said, I do not see a lot of that happening, at least in my country. And it is wonderful to see, that outside. And I do see a lot of institutes coming forward and doing that, understanding that Agile in itself is an area of focus and not just software development. Because I see, in terms of software development framework, they talk about the waterfall, then the iterative model, but there is no direct focus on, okay, this is Agile, and hence how it can further, it can induce agility. The last thing which I'll see is, um, organizations definitely are crazy right now. The whole Agile fever is there. Everyone is transforming to Agile. Everyone has already transformed to Agile, and yet there is this old system which is absolutely always there. The biggest Agile implementation approach is Scaled Agile framework. There are a couple of other frameworks as well, but as much as Scaled Agile has been able to market and position themselves, others are still struggling. And so if you see the work, it's the Agile transformation frameworks. But where is the conversation around coaching? Where is the conversation around human system dynamics, org design, org development? And so hence the collaboration of HR practices, which means the business agility, the functional agility. That conversation is missing, is what I very strongly feel. Uh, just 2 cents on where research is right now and where it'll go. Right now, the research is in form of scaling frameworks and the certificates. And which it's going to move, we all know with COVID, it's going to move towards remote facilitation, remote org development and collaboration, and hence agility. So that's how I look at the whole research and academia and its importance in Agile.
Okay, thank you very much for your first presentation of your view on Agile research and industry, and collaboration was an important issue you mentioned. Let's continue with Aino.
Yep. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Deepti, because I feel much better now. I came here thinking, oh, in Denmark, I don't think there's much collaboration between research and Agile and the people actually doing it. And we're probably very stupid in Denmark. So I'm deeply relieved that you have the same experience from me. Thank you. Yeah, that's my start. So looking at the different areas that are perhaps painted by what I'm interested in when it comes to Agile research, I see different types of research. There's the case studies, where they take a case study perhaps over a year, perhaps over more than a year, when they see how it's implemented and how it worked there. And then it's surveys, where they have the possibility in academia, at least with the PhD students, they can spend a lot of time on making surveys and going through the surveys and all the data. which is interesting as well to tell us what has already happened. And then we have the ones who are proposing a new methodology based on what they see in different research, and looking at what theories are real theories and what does actually Agile mean in theories. So there's a difference to how these things are used, I think. And the trouble with all of these experiments that I see in the research is that there's not much statistical analysis, because it's made on very small numbers of people, very small numbers of organizations, even though we have the surveys with more. It's difficult to make a blind test, and it's almost never replicated to see whether other people's research still hold valid. So that's the problems that I see with Agile research, and maybe Robert can help me evaluate that for real, because he probably knows more about that than I do. But those are some of the problems that I see with the actual research. And then another thing is that it seems like right now we're only looking at Agile research if it says Agile. And I think there's a lot of interesting research also prior to now, which is about Agile. So for instance, when I took my PhD, I was working with a professor who was very much into participatory design. And I think participatory design is what we want in Agile, working with the business, creating the software. So another thing that I think is interesting is how we're trying in research to take the Agile outside of the IT development. We're trying to take it into construction. We're trying to take it into renovation of houses. We're trying to take it into other parts of the business than just IT, which I think is phenomenal. And I hope that the businesses will look at this research and see how they can do it. It can sometimes be hard to see how you can use Agile outside, but to me, the Agile ways of doing things is the only way of doing things. So here's a weird example: childbirth in Denmark. So when you are pregnant with your first child in Denmark, you are proposed to make a birth contract with your midwife. And that birth contract, you write down what you want to happen during the birth, and what kind of medication you want, and how long you want to be in that position, and those things. So a birth contract is very good to have. But sometimes this birth contract becomes a promise to the pregnant woman. So it's a bit like the Agile contract with systems development, that if you take the contract and just say that this is how it should be, then you'll get really disappointed, because reality will change. There's no birth that really follows that birth contract, because it's like software development. So it'll change, and you have to be Agile about it. And I think it would be great if we could have that agility in other parts of life as well. So if we could take that from research and into our lives, it would be great. How can organizations benefit from research in Agile? More than they do now, that's for sure. Right now, the organizations that I meet, what they know from Agile is what they've happened to read in blog posts or happened to see in presentations in different conferences, if they do go to conferences. Otherwise, they're sort of, if I come out as an Agile coach, they just listen to what I'm saying. So we definitely need somebody to help them to get a more nuanced view on what is happening and what is Agile. I think that the good thing about research is that it's allowed to be complicated and not have the answer, which is a problem, because sometimes people really want the answer and then they might want to look at the research. But I think that's the power of research. And if we could have that in the industry, that would be great. I was thinking maybe somebody, not me, could make a book every year about the best research papers that industry can use with Agile. So that's my final words. I hope somebody will do that, not me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your insights about your view. And continue with Robert.
Well, I must say I agree with almost everything said by Deepti and Aino. Let me focus on a few things from my perspective. Agile is now like 2 decades old. And when I review the issues that I thought needed most attention 20 years ago, I'm disappointed and shocked to find that they're the same now. I believe that Agile has changed the way we do things inside software development teams enormously,
Mm.
but I'm concerned that the relationships between the software development team and other people who are essential to developing successful software, I'm concerned really haven't progressed much at all. The customer or product owner, both in my research and in the contacts that I still have through my students and with my industry partners in Ottawa, is in bad shape. As recently as last year, at a presentation from a very large organization using Agile, I became interested in the role of their product owner. And my question in this presentation was, how often do you talk to your product owner? This is a question in 2020. The answer was every 3 months. Every 3 months, we talk to our product owner. This is in 2020. You can't be agile if you only talk to your product owner every 3 months. I work with a number of graduate students doing work on user interaction design, UX, both UX research and UX design. When they go to work, they're astonished because even with Agile, they're regarded as outsiders.
Mm.
They often work on a different floor in a different building than the software development team. They often only meet with that team at scheduled meetings where they're given a slot to present. This is not Agile. And still this is happening in 2020, and I presume it's happening in 2021, but I haven't had any direct reports in the last month or so. This is a serious challenge for us. And there's other groups as well. One, for instance, which my work with Martin shows is still a problem, has to do with self-management. In the surveys that Martin Andreas conduct in the Swiss Agile study, what is the dominant factor in satisfaction by people in software development teams using Agile? It's self-management. That factor alone dominates satisfaction. If you get that right, everything else is secondary in satisfaction. What is the number one hindrance? Lack of management support from the organization where these people work for doing things in the Agile way. And this is repeated in several of the 2 yearly studies that Martin and Andreas do and that I've helped do the analysis for. So these are still serious challenges. One that's particular of interest to me, which becomes sadly more important every day, has to do with security. A lot of the security problems that we have in the world online, from phishing to ransomware, basically happen because of vulnerabilities in software that's developed. Now, software security, both the testing and the development, is another group of people that should be involved collaboratively in software development. But again, very little is talked about that, and what I have seen really can't be considered agile. So that's what I think are the important challenges now, and sadly, they're the same as they were a long time ago. Getting to a point that Aino made, and I was wondering how to address in terms of methodological rigor and our empirical work. And we do, despite the fact that I've been doing a lot of quantitative empirical analysis with Martin and Andreas, a lot of my own work has been qualitative. We do mirroring, we do shadowing, we camp out with groups for many days. My students are there for long periods of time, and we use various qualitative methods to figure out what goes on there. If the issue is generality, and this is something that I think I know you were referring to, the world now is really quite difficult because no two agile teams saying they do agile, do exactly the same thing. Even if they claim they are doing a practice, it will be done differently. One of the most vexing things that I experienced in helping Martin and Andreas analyze their data from their studies is when there's an anomalous answer in that questionnaire, I want to know why. I want to go and visit those people and find out how this could be true and learn about their experience. And my guess is that something complex is going on there. And I need to find out before I can talk about any kind of generality in the findings. That's a huge challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I believe are the priorities for us now: collaboration with other groups outside the actual programmer team who are instrumental to success. And in our research, it's the hugely diverse set of practices that are being adopted and used every day now, and have been for a while, in the population, which means generality is really difficult.
Mm.
Okay, thank you very much for your view on academic and agile research. Are there any questions or remarks from the guests?
We don't have access to the chat, I think.
We don't have access to the chat. That's Katie, can you have a look on it? Peggy?
Yes, there's nothing on the chat yet. Whose screen are we looking at here?
Martin's.
Yours, Martin's. Yeah, if you can.
There's nothing on the chat.
Can't see. Can you not see chat on yours?
We're not allowed to chat. If you're a guest, it tells you cannot chat.
Okay.
Okay,
Actually,
so what?
Few of
Maybe
us
we
enough.
can
Maybe we could
raise
just
hand and
Got a hand up. Someone, Ulla has got a hand up. So right, let me see if I can. Ulla, can you unmute yourself and ask a question? I can unmute you.
I actually, that was by mistake because I was looking for the chat, but yes, I do have I have some questions. It's been an interesting conversation, so thank you all for making the time to come together and organize this panel discussion. Is really enlightening. So I am currently an agile coach and a business, well, I call myself a business agility coach. But I do, a lot of the things you all have said resonate with me in terms of the lack of the methodological rigor, and it's really different for various teams. I am also a Safe Agile Scaled Agile Framework program consultant. So I'm currently helping a multinational retail organization with their Agile pivot. And the key thing is, for me, it's almost like, how can we, I am actually thinking of going into getting a PhD or doing some research to find out how can we basically code these. I mean, first of all, is a mindset, but how can we then code it in a way that it's almost possible to repeat it in a way that's to repeat its implementation across organization whilst keeping it, how do I put it, keeping it configurable to people's context. Now, Scaled Agile Framework has done it, but there are always like, it depends answers, and I, as an agile coach, I end up giving this sort of it depends answers to their questions, and it's to my frustration and to my clients' frustration as well. But that's really the case. So what sort of how can we go about addressing it? Because yes, it seems like there's an acknowledgement that there is an issue there and there's a gap, but what are your thoughts about how to go about addressing it in a rigorous manner? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to respond to Ulla's question?
Well, I think this is difficult simply because we face a problem that's always been true ever since we coined the term agile. I thought that the decisions taken at the Snowbird conference, where all of these processes, which had been used for some time. Well. All of those processes had been around, and I thought it was a wonderful marketing decision to choose an influential word like agile to put them all under the same umbrella. That was a good idea. But like many ideas like this, it concealed actual quite differences in what was going on. The one that I reflect on most is lean. Now, I love Mary and Tom Poppendick, and I thought that they made great contributions. But the way that's rolled out, I'm not exactly certain that lean is agile. I'm concerned that a number of the ideas that came along with lean fly in the face of agile. The dismissive talk about waste, to me, is problematic because agile means ability to change quickly. And ability to change quickly can only be based on learning. Yeah. And if one will never learn on the grounds that it might lead to waste, then you have a real problem. I could talk about this for a while. The other problem that happened is that the term agile to many people, including people I've seen give talks at industry conferences, meant, hey, it's all good. Figure it out, guys. Go for it. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And this leads to a problem where no two people have the same idea of what's going on. And I think that's, you know, that's a real problem that we face. Now, I don't know that that's something that we can change as researchers. But one of the things that I do believe we can do as researchers is study that phenomenon and how it works. You know, one of the pieces of
I think we're there research. Now. Let's press on. I was telling you, I hope you were getting at least the
probably mute others.
I think it was another presentation in the background.
I see. So I think that qualitative work of a certain kind should be done on exactly this phenomenon and how it arises. So that's the way I would address that specific question. I'm sorry, I don't think I caught the name of the person who asked it.
It was Ulla.
Ulla.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. And the first thing that I always do when I come into a new organization is to ask the people who invited me to help with an agile implementation, so give me your definition of agile. And even in that organization, every person gives me a different definition of agile. So I think that's one of the big problems. That in itself is funny, but also depressing, right? Yeah. And the way that I think about agile is extremely simple, which might make anger some people, but I just think of it as inspect and adapt.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think our problems still remain the same, and there is no straight answer to this because we can't force organizations and make it more of a government policy that this is what you have to do, this is how you have to enable your people. Because I think the most complex thing is human system dynamics, and that remains the same. The relationships have not changed. So you bring in any framework, you will again end up creating the same structure. The same hierarchy is fine, but how it is operated is not fine. So we'll end up creating the same mess. Yeah. And then, of course, another point is nobody ever talks about that this fast agile will happen slowly. Because then, as soon as you go about transformation or you go about, any work in agile, the expectation is, okay, it should happen in another 1 month, 2 month, 3 months time. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
The thing that occurs to me, looking at my notes about collaboration, which I made in preparation for this, is that I'm concerned that often the things that makes teams able to create great software are not things that we've identified. I think often they're kind of minimized, but have very big importance. Let me give the example of pair programming. Perhaps not much done these days, but when pair programming was first articulated in XP, and studied, particularly, for instance, by Laurie Williams in North Carolina, with some very careful and painstaking research. The idea was that it reduced errors. You know, when you had two people checking it, the error rate would go down. And Laurie Williams, in her careful studies, showed that, in fact, two people working this way were basically as productive as one person when you counted all of the error corrections that had to be done. Now, that's a very interesting result. But I was much more impressed and resonated with my studies by the work of Sally Ann Freudenberg that she did with Helen Sharp a number of years ago, that suggested that the real importance of pair programming was the learning and the conversations that one had while programming and the knowledge transfer through these informal communications that happened when programmers worked together. Now, that was never given as the reason for pair programming, but that was the critical thing. I could say the same thing about XP's practice of the customer on site. When you've got a customer on site, one had conversations, one asked questions, one learned the background about why the customer has asked for this sort of thing. And those conversations were what made the software successful. Unless we can identify these little things in the practices that really make the difference, I'm concerned that the focus on practices and so forth will never tell the whole story.
Yeah. So isn't it like this? I know I see there are two hands raised, and I'll just keep it very short. But I feel, see, it's more about it all boils down to people, and it boils down to engagement, and so it boils up to leadership. It always goes to this point: leadership. What sort of leader you have in place? So yeah, whether you have practices or not, whether you are following the established way of doing agile and being agile, doesn't matter. It all comes down to what sort of leadership you have. And so if they are able to fire up work, passion within the people, then everything is done. If you can't, then you can hire as many as people and you can put in as many as practices and things won't work out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, there are two hands up. Dominique, you have a question?
Yes. First, thanks for the panel to the very nice and interesting exchange. And I think it's unusual to have talk about research and practice together. I think it's great. It's missing most of the time. I have a first question about the research on Agile, which I think is pretty young, recent. I've took part both as a research and practitioner, and when we looked at actual existing research, there was very few in-depth research about Agile, most about mono project, a little bit about scaling, but only about safe, almost, as if Agile is research in Agile is following practitioner and not the reverse. Which makes it a bit awkward sometimes. I think there's different level of implementation of Agile at the team level, which pose certain questions, at scaling on multi-teams, which pose other questions. When you generalize Agile in an organization, which again raise other questions, like how you interact with a global organization and not just on one team making things happen and collocating people. And even when you speak about some talk before at the beginning about organizing agility, business agility, which I think is again something else. I speak more about adaptive organization. And taking the same word to speak about everything, I think mix-ups and doesn't make things clear and doesn't able us to pose the right questions and confuses everyone. And I think research could clarify the questions more than the practitioner. We are more interested in selling and pushing what's pushed by the market. And I don't see that too much happen yet. And maybe a similar question, and the last one, and I'll stop, is, do we really need, or is it really interesting to have a research area on Agile? I know there's one research paper, I mean, Scott Ambler began working on a paper, academic paper about Agile, but it's the only one. But most of the research is about collaborative, about management, organization, IT, software, and not specifically about Agile. I don't know if it should be a research area as a specific one, or if we just have to use different research in different domains that contribute to Agile in a way.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. So do we need our own research in Agile, or can we profit also from other domains maybe, who did a lot research in maybe in organizational management, in psychology? Something I noticed also, I've set up a continuous education course at our university for professionals, and we are talking a lot about psychological safety in teams. And psychology has done a lot of research in this domain. So should we closer work together with other domains in this area? Yep, I know.
I think that we really need to look at other research areas in order to get answers for agile development in industry. I think that we need to have agile on research papers still to make people know what to look for. I think it's difficult enough as it is. To the point about the research following the practice, I think it's true for various reasons. Well, there is some of the research, like proposing a new methodology, which is trying to set up a new theory, which you can't really say in the same way it's following. But if you think of Agile as looking at the interactions between people and how the system of people works, it makes sense that the research follows the practice, because we're looking at the people and looking at how it works. And that's what you can see, for instance, in research in psychology or cognitive training. It's the same, that you have to look at what people actually do to make any research, because that's what the research is all about. So I think it makes sense. But also I think that academics are becoming much better in computer science in general to look at the practices in the real world, whilst the other way around is not really implemented yet. And I remember there was somebody who decided to send a good research paper to people every morning, and I listened to that for a few years. I don't remember who it was, but I think it was a good idea that he would read like 5 or 6 research papers a day, and you could sign up for his newsletter, and every day you could get an interesting research paper with his own little executive summary. So something like that. It needs to be digested for the industry, I think. I don't know if that answered the question. I forgot what the question was. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Okay.
I'll just put in one thing. So I understand, and I've talked to people who are applying Agile in other fields other than software engineering. I think that's interesting. I'm interested to hear about it. Although I feel my expertise is in software engineering, and one of the reasons that I thought Agile made sense in software engineering and was different than it had been in other fields is the way that we can easily change software, because in essence, there is no production phase. Once we've made one program, there's no production of making 1,000 of them. That just happens. When I pick up my phone, I think practically every time I pick up my phone, one of the apps on the phone has been updated. We are now used to software being continually changed over time. There are very few industries where that's possible. And so I think there are special characteristics about software engineering and development that work with Agile, and I'm less clear that characteristic applies to absolutely everything.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about studies in psychology and studies in sociology that would probably explain some of the things that are happening in Agile. But I agree with you. But you could turn the argument around, and you could say when it comes to renovating your house, for instance, it's much more important that you talk to the product owner every day, because otherwise it's very difficult to change it.
That's true. And I use this as one of my examples. What is the difficulty? You will have a very expensive house.
Yes, that's true.
It's true.
Okay, any more questions or remarks from the audience?
So I'd lowered my hand. Sorry, can I? It's all I hear again. Apologies.
Sure.
No, so I'd lowered my hand because between Dominic's question and the comments from the panelists, my question was answered, which was I was going to say, could there be some sort of alignment with in the field of psychology, sociology, and possibly law, to help explain the phenomenon of, Agile and how it's implemented. And so you'd already answered that, so thank you. I want to kind of go back to a statement, Robert, you made earlier on. You said that lean isn't Agile. This is just a comment and my opinion and my views alone. Lean isn't Agile, however, it is complementary. Agile has kind of evolved to also, incorporate other known principles and processes and practices that have worked, which are complementary. So lean is lean, and it started with the Toyota production system, and it was really about production of mass production of maybe physical products and all that. So the need to eliminate waste was more critical in those sorts of situations than now. But there are aspects of lean, for example, Kanban, which is like, visualizing the work and being able to see it. So it isn't Agile. And for the people who know, we know it's not Agile, but it's more about what are those things that, you can complement the practice, the mindset of Agile. What are the things that can help you practically apply it? So I'm not teaching you. I know you all are the experts here. But the other thing I wanted to say is, arguably, you could look at, the traditional delivery methods like waterfall. Even in waterfall, there are, two organizations apply waterfall the same way. It's my argument, because you have Prince2 or the PMP. You still have like different aspects of those bodies of knowledge that you can apply to, that one institution might apply and doesn't apply. So I think, Deepti, my view is that you hit it on the head, because we're human beings, where the complexities, if we were computers, then it would be software in, and then the output is going to be exactly the same. But we are human beings, different cultural backgrounds and mindsets and upbringings and worldviews. No, even if it's the same piece of information, because we already have the different lenses we interpret things, it's never going to be the same. So that's just my 2 cents. As far as there are human beings, the complexity lies with us, because we are complex. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, this, I would just want to add furthermore to it. As the responsibilities and the role grows in the organization, it in a certain way becomes a little scary, because now you are no more, on the other side, where you can complain that my manager is not doing it right. When you get the responsibility and when you have an opportunity to do something, it is only then you realize that, oh my God, keeping team motivated, having, the waste gone in terms of enabling team to continuously produce value, it is very difficult. And it's a skill that you learn on job. There is no way you can learn, because you will always have a certain bias, against the manager or the boss. So it is human system dynamics, and it all boils down to the leadership. It all boils down to this person. Personally, I have seen, till the time you are engaged, and it's not about developing dependency on the manager or the scrum master. In the Agile, you talk about this role so much. So it's all about the engagement, how motivated, how much, what purpose you can install in people. And it is always about, so you are not in touch with a certain member of team, and you will see slowly the performance or the motivation is going down, because we are emotional beings. We need relationship, we need connection. And if that starts diminishing, the passion, the purpose starts going away. Keeping a huge workforce having same purpose and same amount of motivation is very difficult.
So to keep the panel interesting, I'm going to take a contrary position and argue with Deepti's line here. I don't think it is all about passion and motivation. And in fact, in our studies on the social nature of Agile teams, one of the things that we grew concerned about is that it can be problematic. The person who pioneered this work, Weber, 100 years ago, used this term in English that's normally translated as the iron cage. A better translation from the German would be the steel box or something like this. The dynamic, the social dynamic in Agile teams is very, very powerful, but it can also lead to stress.
Absolutely.
We do see a lot of burnout in these teams, which I think is really problematic. The leadership clearly is important, but I also think that there are, I'm going to call them tricks. They're not really tricks like magic tricks, but for instance, saying there must be a responsible customer representative on site all the time is such a trick, because when they're on site, it's not that they're on site that's important. It's the fact that when they're on site, they can have all those little conversations, similar with pair programming. When there are these mechanisms that you introduce that create the environment where people share, this is a powerful technique. And I think it's more powerful than just telling everyone, hey, collaborate, love your teammates.
Yes.
There has to be things introduced that create this kind of, for instance, when I was talking about the study that we ran that showed how UX designers and the software engineers didn't collaborate well, it's because they were on different floors of the building. There's no way that they could go to the tea room and have an idle conversation because they had different tea rooms. So these little things, these tricks can be important. One that the questioner raised was, I assume this was the reference to Kanban, is the card wall. So we've studied the use of card walls, and the great thing about card walls is not so much that it visualizes the process, but we found in our studies what happens is that the people stand in front of the card wall when they've got a spare moment, and they have conversations about what might happen next, why this thing is being held up, what they might do in the future. And those conversations are a hugely important dynamic, because this is where both learning happens, both situational awareness happens, and you can have the discussions maybe about a better way of doing it. And if you can have that with the product owner, that's even better, because then you can say, we don't really need to do that because there's library functions that we could just use, and it could be part of the product owner would never know that. You need to have those conversations to allow that sort of thing to come up. So that's a powerful kind of tool for those kinds of reasons as well. So, of course, really, I agree with Deepti. Motivation and leadership are clearly important. But these little techniques that cause the right thing to happen can make this so easy.
Oh no, so you just filled the gaps in the statement there. I completely agree with you. And yes, I feel, so I work with this team of 25, when we run this unconference, and then there are another 20, 25 people who run on the floor. And so with so, of course, it starts with sharing the vision and, this is what we are trying to achieve. And that said, everything might be on the website and still, 50% of people won't even check it and they won't know. And they'll be like, okay, fine, we'll just do the part which is given to us. And then there will be a handful of them who will be involved end to end into everything. It's not that you chose and you assigned that, 4 of you will do. They emerge. So yes,
Yeah.
it is about individual quality, and then of course the tricks. Okay, fine. Let's form their trios. Let us get status from 3 trios per day, kind of thing. And then let us leave them with questions. What should we do about the sales part? What should we, how should our marketing be? And so. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, it is not all on the shoulder of leader, but yes, these are tricks. Further, if you completely enable your team, I have seen that with my clients, especially with the startups and the product companies who are aggressively coming up with a new product, or on a very early stage of development, of the product where it has been launched and client is still asking for more changes. In those scenarios, I have seen that product owner really struggles because this empowered team is constantly throwing up suggestions for the backlog, not on the technical front, but as well as on the functional front. And so the other trick, there are other tricks. Now, these are all management tricks which are required to keep team constructively engaged, and rather than just going, crazy. This is another kind of stress that comes in the picture, that why do we not develop that feature? This can be a potential feature. This can actually give you, the evangelist team, especially the product evangelist kids. Oh my God. So yeah, there is a lot of stress with, these product owners face. And then the executives, they will come and they will be like, after these product owners. So as much as in the whole, this agile team dynamics, we see product owners not very openly collaborating and sharing information and just dictating that this is needed to be done. There is another side of this story where, enabled, empowered team is just so excited that, they feel everything should go to the backlog. So yes, there are tricks where you also,
yes,
you can't just do everything, right? You just can't do everything. So
okay,
yes.
we have one hand up for a long time from Sheila.
Yeah.
Now she put her hand down.
Well, I was listening to what you were saying, and you've moved off into a conversation about the personal interactions, where my question was more about the frameworks and the methodologies. Back in the early 80s, I wrote a waterfall life cycle SDLC for a hospital system when they were going from DOS to OS on the mainframes. And
that's the old DOS you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mainframe DOS. I remember that.
Exactly. But even then, we were arguing that we needed to have not just one way to implement it, that there would be, we had a menu where we were saying for a new system implementation, you need to do everything in the SDLC. For a major modification, you would do a subset. For minor maintenance, you would only do a few things, which is not that different really from Agile. I've always looked at it as kind of a continuum from the old waterfall to lean to Agile. And I was surprised when the people that attended Snowbird all seemed to be saying that there had been no methodology, that it had been the Wild West. It seemed to me that that was only because they were working with object-oriented client server where there wasn't anything in place yet like there was for mainframe, where we had the ability to do a version-controlled migration. And at that time, I think most of the time when you made changes to the environment with object-oriented, you literally replaced the entire environment. But I'm wondering how other people see that, because to me it's sort of a Mobius strip, where I've always seen the SDLC as part of the product life cycle, and whether you're doing it Agile or lean or the old waterfall, it's still the product. The system shouldn't drive the product should drive the system.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're coming full circle now with Agile, going back to having a more of a focus on the product and trying to engage the entire enterprise, not just IT. And that seems to be the big challenge now, is to involve the rest of the enterprise. And I wonder how other people see that. Sorry, it was kind of a long, involved question.
It's interesting to think about whether the people who made the Agile Manifesto have not worked on mainframe. I actually don't know, but I would surely like.
They certainly had. They certainly had.
Some of them had, some of them had not, from what they were saying.
Oh,
in the Snowbird conversation they had a week or so ago.
I mean, Kent Beck worked. Kent, Ward Cunningham, Rebecca Wurzbach, they all worked at Tektronix back in the mainframe day. They were there. They might not have talked about it, or they might remember it kind of differently. One little thing,
could have been cowboys that bucked the system back then, because there were some of those, and just pretended it wasn't there.
But the term that we used before Snowbird for Agile was lightweight.
Yeah.
Right. Lightweight was, and it's because we felt, I mean, nobody wanted to carry around all 20 volumes of the SDLC that your company used to use. I mean, we used to make jokes that we spent more time reading documentation than we did writing code. We spent more time writing documentation, frankly, than we did anything. And I think it largely came from the aeronautics and related industries, which even to this day require such a heavyweight documentation process for anything, that any kind of ability to change things midway through the process was hugely problematic. One little thing I will point out, and I'm sure you know it, but just to put it on the table, this business about the product driving the system, while I agree with the sentiment, in 2021, that doesn't quite work. Because the most valuable companies on the planet are software companies. And software and technology now is sufficiently adaptable, sufficiently powerful, that it becomes impossible to conceive lots of products or services unless you're being informed about the capabilities of new software and hardware. So, for example, if you look at what we can do on mobile devices now, if you didn't know the capabilities of mobile devices and what could be done, there's no way that you could design a product. So I believe it has to be a two-way street. I certainly agree with you that it shouldn't only be IT, if you want to use that term, using Agile, but I do think that they have to be a partner. Let me just explain why I'm cautious about the term IT, by the way. Influential paper from the Harvard Business Review about 20 years ago called IT Doesn't Matter. And when they used the term IT, what they meant was organizational support IT. If you're talking about IT, like creation of the iPhone, then that's a very different kind of thing. Because if you're just using IT as a tool to do the kinds of things you do anyway, yeah, sure, go with the lowest bidder. It doesn't really matter. But if you're really going to leverage the power of computer, network, and device technology, then wow, do you ever need it to be a full partner?
Makes sense. Yeah.
I tried to explain this to some people in the finance sector. We were doing an in situ study where we camped out for a week studying the practices in this large financial institution. This is about 2016. And I was shocked to find, because we were doing shadowing, I followed these people around, we looked at, because there's some old timers here, I was shocked to find out, in shadowing one person, that they were writing JCL cards simulated on a screen of exactly the same kind that I wrote when I was a teenager back in the early 1970s. And I thought to myself, one day, a company like Google is going to start up and they are going to wipe the floor with these old financial companies because they know the power of new technology.
Absolutely. Wow. Yep.
This was not a welcome idea in the company I was visiting.
No, that's true. That's actually a very powerful thought. And they are, to a great extent, doing it, but still, sticking to technology, enabling finance, enabling market in various ways. But what if they start doing it? Let's say they start their own Expedia or they start their own banks, and absolutely, and they can do it, but they're just still enjoying the money that's coming from IT. Why should you do that? You still have control of the world, with the IT and the technology. Yeah.
Okay, I would like to come back a little more to the question: what can Agile research do to improve the situation?
Well, so just to mention again what I said in the beginning, I think Agile research has the big benefit that it's okay for it not to come up with one answer, that it can say, well, here's a hypothesis, here are some experiments, and also they have the possibility of making these huge surveys. I think it would be great if some of that good research could come out to people in the industry so that maybe they could be convinced, like Robert said, that pair programming, okay, maybe you don't believe that it'll create better software right now or less errors, but in the long run, the learning will improve the software definitely and improve the organization as a whole. And I think something like that, if that could come out and be more accessible, I don't know how it can be more accessible, but that I think would be great. I think it would also be interesting. I don't know. There's probably a lot of research right now about how this COVID world influences Agile, because we also so much in agreement that the communication and the people and the cooperation is so important, and the small conversations that start without a reason when you're looking at a board or after a retrospective or something like that are so crucial for good Agile and good software development. And what happens now with COVID, with all these things? How much do we actually lose? How much will our software deteriorate and people become less able to work with each other? I hope there's a lot of research going on about that, because as much as I see the benefits of remote working, I'm also hugely worried about what's happening right now, at least in the places where I'm related. And maybe I'm just being a fool with the way that I work with them, but I see some problems.
No, there is definitely a problem, and you actually raised a very valid point. The way we were collaborating, the way our tools were designed, over the access of powerful internet within the the company boundaries and the premises, how all of that will be impacted when we are working virtually. And when we are working in both the modes, so many companies have announced that they would like to keep it virtual indefinitely. And and I think, yes, a lot of research is going on. But ultimately, the research, I feel probably our academics are not empowered so much. They need support. And ultimately, the research results, which we very much fall back and rely on, comes from industry, which is extremely, fueled with so much of support from all the direction. For the research, I think our academia needs to be empowered, and industries should come forward and support. I also don't know how that will happen, but yes, more research is required. And
So the daily paper that I mentioned is by Adrian Corry, and it's called The Morning Paper, which is a great subscription to have to look at all the different papers in computer science, not just the new ones, but also all the papers he's writing. So something like that, but for Agile would be great, because it's bite-sized.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
How well, I think Dominic mentioned it, how well is Agile research present at the major conferences? XP has a research track, But what about the other conferences? How well is Agile established there?
Well, I guess it differs, but for the big conferences that I'm inviting speakers for, I have to admit that not very much.
Yeah.
I've been involved in QCon, GoTo, and the YAO conferences, which are big industry computer science conferences. And when we put somebody who's more a researcher than a practitioner on the stage, we don't see a lot of attendance.
Yeah.
We see a lot of, but how does that work in real life questions? We see a lot of, but you haven't tried this questions.
Yeah.
So we don't do that much. But now based on this, I think I would want to maybe reconsider that again.
Yeah.
That sounds promising.
Completely. Yeah. I know.
Yeah. I used to, so in recent years, for various reasons, I haven't been able to attend many conferences, even before COVID. But, for a while, I used to attend essentially all of them. I attended the one called, went through various names. It just ended up as Agile in the United States, and I attended XP. One of the things that disappointed me so much in Agile in the US, even as that conference grew huge and dynamic and exciting, they marginalized the research track and eventually got rid of it altogether. But I think I don't entirely blame them, because I think we've got some problems on our side as academics as well that have to do with our kind of models of publications and presentations. So for instance, in the track at Agile, where there was the potential to have a huge industry audience, and I completely agree with Aino that, basically it would be very small. The research track was typically in the farthest, smallest room from the conference center, where no one would ever find it by accident. So that's bad. But something that's our fault is that we would often send our students, our master's or our doctoral students, to give presentations there about quite a small piece of work. And of course, at this stage in their career, those students are not excellent, captivating speakers. And so we weren't really looking our best from the research community. So I think we're both complicit in letting down the connection that should have existed between the academic world and the industry world. So I feel bad about that, and it would be wonderful if that could be recreated somehow. XP, much though I love the XP conference, relatively few industry people go to that, and the industry people who do go to that are really industry people who are almost like academics.
I go there always.
But you're also here.
in their kind of work. So, that's problematic too. I also think that a lot of industry people go to conferences with a particular mission from their organization. Go to this conference and attend the sessions on C++ security libraries. Go to the conference and attend the sessions on, in whatever the hot topic for their organization is. So they're there with a specific mission. I
feel even that is good if they send their people with that motive. Right now, it's all about business. So, yeah, I mean, I run so many conferences here, and what I mostly struggle and see that, it's more about business. Nobody is very much keen on sending their people, or probably this is a trend in India. I really don't know. But it's all about business. Who is sponsoring? Sponsors send their people. Who all are sponsoring? With whom our people can interact? What is the number of CXOs, or what is the number of SVPs and directors we can meet? So it is more like that. I see and then there are a bunch of, of course, the Agile tribes people. So they go for networking, and they just go for because they go to the conference, So which is definitely not bad. I love meeting people, and I go to conferences a lot of time to meet and just see, what they're doing, what they're creating, and to get the inspiration and ideas. But not many. There are a handful of companies who invest into their people and they send them just for the experience and learning. The challenge is not many organizations do that. So yeah. But you know what? When you were saying that the Big Agile conference does not give importance to research, I think somehow they are the one who have been still supporting it. I mean, the track is still there, the experience report, and every year they release good number of experience reports. They might not be talking about the PhD research and all, but they do shepherd. Rebecca shepherds, and she leads that initiative, and there are a good number of I presented my report there.
I'm aware of that, and I
Yeah.
have immense respect for Rebecca, and I've talked to her about it. But I want the connection to those PhD students. I want the students to be challenged, and I want that collaboration.
Yeah.
And
You're right. I mean, our students probably don't get that kind of, I don't know, exposure, encouragement, support, whatever they need. I don't know, but I hear you. If they could present, it would have been so amazing. They could have reached to, much bigger audience. And yes, on the research tracks, there is not a lot of participation. So when I get compliment, for my experience report, I feel like, wow, you read that. Oh, awesome.
Okay, there is another hands up from Sheila.
Okay, just before we go to Sheila, Martin, one little thing to hear. One thing that I think that we should make certain that we promote is that one thing that we have as academics is we're independent and we can be brutally honest about things. We're not selling products. We're not even selling our services. I think that we should promote the fact that we are impartial in the research that we're doing. Sorry, Martin and Sheila.
Yep, no problem. Yeah, thanks for the additional comment. Yes. So, Sheila, you had your hand up.
Sorry, I accidentally muted myself again. My question is about tools that are being used now and in the future. So many companies are saying that they're either not going back to in-person or they're going back to some limited in-person. And in the meantime, we have all these tools that are evolving. There's obviously Teams and Zoom and Mural and Miro and Group Map and Asana, and there's such a long list. Is anybody doing research about how those are evolving? And the other question related is that there's now a remote agile framework, and I wonder if anyone started to look at that in terms of where things are going if the whole set of industries continues to evolve.
Okay, question to the panelists. Do you know of research and tools?
I don't.
No, what I know of that is out of date. And it's kind of curious. The success story I find most odd is Slack. Because, Slack is essentially IRC from 40 years ago, which has become $1 billion company. And lots of people I know utterly swear by it for exactly the kind of collaborative sort of thing that you don't get through other sorts of things. And that's probably being increased now. But I hope lots of research is going on right now, because you're totally right. The world is changing. In fact, the world was changing slightly before. I know all kinds of large companies who no longer have a policy of having office space for all of their employees, a large number. And so I asked a very senior person who works in a large New York-based company what was driving this, and his answer surprised me. His answer was, "What's driving that? Real estate." He said.
Yeah.
And so it's not just COVID. COVID will accelerate it. If I was enough of a gambler, the market I would be investing in now is conversion of big office buildings into luxury apartments.
That's a good idea.
That's noted.
Some days back, somebody was just asking, what should we do, Deepti? And I said, it is going to go away. I mean, it's the best time to buy a house. You will get best deal.
Okay, time is almost over. I have a final question for the panelists. If you're a researcher or a professional, if you're a researcher, what research would you do next if you could just select in concerning Agile? And as a professional, what would you like to be solved by a researcher as a professional from the academics?
I would really like to have something to show to my clients that proves that Agile is the best way. But the problem is that I talk to a lot of people and they say they want Agile, but when I tell them what the investment is, they say, oh, I think maybe we can just do Agile with a bit like Rational Unified Process or Prince2 or something like that, because that's what we need. We need the change management. We need everything like that. But if I could somehow convince them, that would be great.
Okay, thanks.
I will continue my work on the experience report we started, and the Flip conference. I would say it's not a conference. It's not an. It's more of an unconference. Where we there is no sage on stage, and it's more of a lot of brainwriting and then brainstorming and creating themes and then generating that. So I'll continue my work, which is more around transformation in India, looking at, of course, the culture, mindset, and socioeconomic position, which means going away from colonialization mindset to democracy, and then opening to world. And in recent, I'd say 10 years, the startups which have come up and the way they work. Now you go to organizations and you talk about Scrum, or you talk about iteration, and you tell them benefits. They're like, what nonsense? Of course we do that. Tell us beyond that. And so there, of course, as even we were talking in the starting, that Agile is very close to engineering. It is happening now. And as Sheila was saying, I think, or maybe somebody else was saying, that it's more like a Mobius loop. You see, the whole water cycle, the SDLC life cycle. So either you have such a smooth, rocket fast CI/CD pipeline, which enables you to complete, the whole cycle within the iteration, or else, there will be some checks and stoppage points. And at some point, you have to do a batch processing of things, which is not bad, because it is faster than what you were already at. And that's Agile. It's not you have to be the fastest and you have to be that nirvana stage. No, it's again a journey, and it's better than better. And so it's previous, so it's better. It's a continuous learning, continuous improvement. And so, yeah, I'll continue my work on that, which will also help industries here to reflect and see what is needed. And that's what my mission is, and that's what I mostly work around with my community.
Okay, thank you very much. And Robert?
So I've got two ideas if I was going to start a biggish kind of project. One that's very practical is that I would try and do something on improving security. And this is reducing the kind of vulnerabilities which are in code, which can be taken advantage of by attackers, because I think Agile could accommodate that quite well. And I think there's a crying need for that. So that's a practical thing. On the more theoretical thing, I would like to go back to some implications for cultural historical activity theory along the lines are done by Yrjö Engström at the University of Helsinki about new methods for collaborating between different groups. Angstrom has done some really interesting work from getting different groups to see eye to eye better together in healthcare, for instance, which I think are really directly applicable to what we need to do, and could help the real collaboration. So that's the theoretical work. Are you ready, Martin, for a parting comment? Because I have one here.
Sure.
In software engineering, you know, in the whole 60-year history of software engineering, one of the principles that we hold most strongly is that of separation of concerns and encapsulation of functions and objects. My thought about reviewing all of my notes here is, that's great for software, but we should never let it apply to us. We're not encapsulated objects.
Yeah, we're not microservices.
That's right. We should be diffuse so that we can share and chat and get other perspectives. We're not objects, and that's the secret to our success if we only let it happen.
Yeah.
So the evil of separation of concerns. Okay, thank you very much. Time has gone very fast, actually. So thank you very much for the panelists for the very interesting discussion, and for the audience participating. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm not sure if you have come a step further about the future of academic, but I think we've discussed a lot of interesting aspects and ideas, and there's still a lot to do. Thank you.
And it's great to meet you, Deepti, and Aino too. And thank you for the questioners as well. Dominique, it's good to see you again as well.
Same here.
Yeah,
Lovely.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm sure everything